Welcome to the Best Of series, where we're celebrating the most inspiring moments and powerful insights from our recent episodes. Whether you're new to the podcast or a longtime listener, these highlights capture the heart of our conversations, bringing you wisdom, guidance, and a fresh perspective on the journey of growth, love, and healing. Join us as we revisit these transformative discussions and discover the gems that have resonated the most with our listeners and with me. Let's dive in and explore what makes these moments truly unforgettable.
So I have little kids, very young. They're almost 5 and almost 7. And I read something once that someone prolific said, and it was like, you have the tendency when you're dealing with your children to think, well, how is what they're doing right now? Is that habit going to be there when they're 20? Like, am I setting that by this one little instance? Is if I don't discipline them now, are they not going to be able to handle this when they're 20? And whoever this therapist was, and I wish I could remember it, they were like, hold on a minute. Just think of next week. You don't have to think about the next decade. And that really hit home for me because especially with kids, especially with relationships, especially with big things in life, you go to the far out versus the immediate.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can't name the client, but like I have several clients, and one in particular that comes to mind, that they ask this like very sweet question, which is consistently, which is, if I do this, if I didn't hug them long enough, will that affect their attachment style? They didn't come immediately to me. Did I do something to affect how they're going to be as adults? And the answer is similar. It's like, whoa. What's happening in you in this moment? Ooh, that stings that they didn't come to me right away. They came to the other parent. Or the concern of like, when you're wrapped in the anxiety of what's could happen in the future, how is that affecting your ability to be with them in the present or yourself?
Yeah.
And there's a consequence. That's where the consequence shows up.
Yeah, I think not being in the present is the issue.
Yeah. And we can say that, but that's absolutely not as easy as it sounds.
Nothing is ever as easy as it sounds.
Speaking of, as a producer, that's the magic of movies, where it just is like somehow it all makes sense. Like we can see the logic in
or social media,
like through the filters of social media, things just like, oh, they're so easy. Everyone's having a good time. Or
I wake up like this.
I wake up with this makeup filter just happens to be on.
I mean, good lighting. Thank God for good lighting.
Thank God for good lighting. That's really how you get your way into different scenarios, is good lighting. No, but it's true, Lindsay. You're right. It's like nothing as easy as it looks, and if it does look as easy as it looks, it's bullshit.
Agree. Totally agree.
Even the research on stress, and it's like the actual like originator of that term outside of architecture, when he's talking about stress, is he's talking about our ability to be in this constant state of adaptability, this dance of life, as opposed to like stress is this doom thing, or stress is something we should just be able to always maneuver. It's like, it's how much resource do we have in any given moment to be in the dance of adaptability to the stressors of life.
I love how you say that. I love it because I was thinking as you were talking about running or working out, and when you stress your muscles, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Yeah. And then they repair.
Yeah.
And so the thought that we have of stress is always this negative thing, but it's not.
No, exactly. And the more we think about it as negative, and the more we encounter it with that negative thought, the more toxic our experience of it is, when it's actually not.
Right?
Yeah. Like when we can take the lens off of something that's negative, like even having to go produce Larry King Now could be considered negative and challenging, or the Grammys or the Tonys, like all of that. Or what is the lens to which we want to view it from will affect our physiology and our mind state.
For sure. I mean, for me, that was my dream, but someone else, that might absolutely set them over the edge, because they have no desire, no idea how to do it, whatever. But yeah, it depends on your starting point too, right?
Yeah. Did you know you hit your dream when you hit your dream?
Oh, that's such a good question. There have been times in my life where and I can tell you there are a few specific times where I knew I was at the right place at the right moment, at the
Mhm.
right time, with the right person, and that things had landed where I hoped they would land, if
Mm.
that makes sense. And
It does.
it's hit me sometimes. It's literally like hit me in the face, in a way of, oh my God, this is what I've been working so hard for, or oh, this is what it feels like. And then to also answer your question, there have been a few times you go through life or you go through something that's hard and you come out the other side. But while you're going through this hard thing, you're thinking, why me? Why do I have to go through this? This is everyone else is getting this and I'm still struggling. And then you get to the other side and you realize you're lucky enough if you realize why you went through that struggle
Mm.
and you realize it was all worth it because what you got, you might have waited for it longer, but you got it better.
Mm. Oh,
Does
we
that make
say that
sense?
again. I just want that to melt into
Okay.
everyone's heart right now who's struggling and who's in that place of just,
So I'm going to go there. I'm going to go straight to
yeah,
relationships because that's what we're going to end up talking about. But
yeah.
something that I said in my vows, I won't say it as beautifully now because I haven't looked at those for a very long time. And I only said them out loud once in my life. But I said something like, I didn't always know why, but I waited longer and I got it better.
Mm. That's so sweet. And I don't know, it feels hopeful.
Yeah, I am a person who chooses to approach life positively
Mhm.
from a happier, positive glass half full standpoint, not unrealistically, because I think that head in the clouds is not a good thing, but I have people in my family who suffer from depression or who they would take your drama quiz probably and there are questions on there that are like, do you feel overwhelmed by life and do you feel like you're not getting it, things like other people, and who would answer yes to those questions. But I've made it a very conscious decision to approach my life in a positive, optimistic way. Always.
And that is why I do the work that I do, is to actually create space
Mm.
where it's always been filled, where it's always been filled with sometimes the things that we really want it to be filled with, and other times we don't want it to be there ever, ever, no more, ever again. And so how do we discern
Mm.
what we want to keep and what we want to unload? And so it's this unnecessary holding
Mm.
of either material things, thought patterns, anything that we just want to take inventory of. And that usually happens around midlife, and
Mm.
sometimes in your 40s and even 50s, we start to look at our life and go, time to take inventory. And that's what I did. And it happened because my life came crashing down. I was married to a very narcissistic, toxic man
Mm.
for 13 years. From the outside looking in, it would have looked like I had everything. I was married to a doctor. I lived in a very large home, two beautiful boys. We had the cars, we had the vacations, everything. But I found myself in this very, very difficult time in my life. And I thought, how the hell did I get here?
Mm.
And how the hell am I going to get myself out of here?
Mm.
But I was stuck.
What let you know? I mean, like 13 years is a long time to be in the sort of groove of something. And it's often like the more we're grooved into something, the harder it is to unadhere ourselves or to come out of or to even recognize, something is off, but we can even do anything about it. So I think I've heard you talk about it as like this time period of chaos or this experience of chaos, but how did you recognize it and begin to identify what to do with it?
Well, at first, I think everyone thinks this way, like, oh, it'll get better. Things will get better. Even though I was crying myself to sleep every night alone in my bed, thinking, what am I going to do? To answer your question, it started because it's really started affecting my health. And I was just in my 30s and I thought, and I was in healthcare and I thought, wait a minute, I know what's happening to my patients.
Yeah.
And here it is now happening to me. And I was like, no, I'm the last person for my health to start declining.
Yeah.
And not just my physical health, but my mental, emotional health. And when you are in pain and suffering, emotional pain, deep, deep, deep despair, that will get you to waken up to the truth of your life. And up until that point, I was just pushing everything under the carpet. I mean, I think that's what we do.
Yeah.
And I think there's really an epidemic of looking away at the truth of our life, thinking that things will just go away miraculously. And when they don't, so here I was sitting in a period of my life where my health was ailing, my mental health was shot, forget about it. Like, I need someone to just knock on my door and save me. And my kids were struggling, and I thought, I need to be the healthiest mom that I can be. That's what they deserve. And that's what inspired me. Because at the time, I couldn't save myself.
Yeah.
They inspired me. And that's why I've been on the journey, is to save myself from a very dark time. And I feel like I've saved myself. And I wanted to share how I did that with the world, because I'm really here to help people.
Yeah. It sounds like you really entered into that dark night of the soul of like utter despair. I mean, crying yourself to sleep, that makes my heart ache for you. And I think so many of us can actually go, oh, I've been there. Or you wake up in the panic of like, how will they be today? What will I do to upset them? The walking on eggshells, the multitude of experiences.
Yes, you're always walking on eggshells. And that was the beginning of causing my nervous system to just completely dysregulate.
Yeah.
And I was hopeful though, because see, my childhood experiences were so wonderful. I grew up in Northern California in the redwood forests. I had a healthy childhood. You know, the things that influenced me the most in my childhood were nature, was a healthy environment, a healthy home environment, healthy parents, travel, and my experiences in healthcare with helping people. And so it was always a healthy beginning, a foundation. And then when things turned, I thought, oh, wait a minute, how did I get here? But I knew that there was something to go back to, that it was possible. I just didn't know how to. I felt like I had gotten so far off the path of health. And how could I go back and find that again? And how was I so healthy growing up? What were the things I was doing, and what was I exposed to? So I had that example early on, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine having some type of home base of that sense of security and safety and stability. It almost, for some of us, we have had that, like yourself. And I think that's so beautiful, is like, almost like as a beacon back home to it, even when we've been disrupted from it. And others have never had that experience, so have to create that in new communities or new situations to move into that. So I really hear that. Like, how the hell do I get back to that place where it's like there's a fertile sense of safety and security?
Absolutely. How do I feel safe again? How do I feel safe, not only in my environment? How do I create safety for my children? How do I create safety in my body? We have to feel so safe in our bodies in order to even feel like we can move one step forward.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what carried me. I can only say it was the grace of God that carried me and gave me the courage to complete my marriage. Those days I look back and I think it really wasn't me doing all those things. It was like something took over me, which I truly believe was my soul carrying me through that dark night and literally guiding me out. And so I really am grateful that I followed that.
Yeah.
And believe in that, because that really has helped me through this whole very difficult time. And so I went from that big house, I went from not having to work and be stay-at-home mom to all of a sudden my kids and I in a small little house, working full time. And my whole life changed almost overnight. And I thought, well, but at least I don't have to be walking on eggshells. At least I can begin to explore who I am, because I had totally lost myself. I mean, when you are in an unsafe environment, you're just trying to survive.
It's not safe to be at home in yourself. Yeah, of course.
That's right.
And all the ways that, often that create that unstable environment is eroding to that core sense of self. Like what we know of who we are is, if we're walking on eggshells, it's because that it has often been abused or attacked or broken down as a means of control. And
I've always had a very, very strong, maybe not so much religious, but spiritual, deep spiritual feeling of there's something greater than me, that I'm not alone. And I think that's a very important message, is that we are never alone in our darkest moments. That whatever it is, and I call it sometimes Gus, God, universe, spirit, like just whatever you want to call it, let's get beyond the name, but just know that there is something greater than us that is always there, loving us and supporting us and getting us through the most difficult times, and has the answers for us. When they say the answers are all within you, it was like, okay, well, I understand that they could be there, but like, where are they? What are they saying? And how do I get there? And that was always frustrating. And so that's why I've developed this method called the Get Quiet Way, because this is how you get there. This is how you hear those messages very clearly. And so I was thrilled to know that, yes, all the messages are within you, and there is a way to get to hear those messages. We just have to get quiet enough and present enough to hear them, and then be able to trust them enough and take action on them. And that's a whole other level of being, as you know.
Yeah. What would you say these messages are from?
Well, they're from our soul.
Okay.
I believe that we are energy and that we are matter. Obviously, we're matter.
And we matter.
And we matter. But we're also animated by an energy that I call the soul. The most suffering that happens in the world today is that we are only in our minds. We are only in our bodies, but we have not connected to really what animates us. And that is what I call the soul. And that soul, I believe, is encoded before we even come into this lifetime. I mean, this is all kind of woo-woo stuff, but I really believe this because this is my personal experience. And I've shared this with many others, obviously. It's encoded with what we're here to do in this lifetime. And I think all suffering comes when we have disconnected to this energy that is encoded with why we're here. And that's why we feel so lost.
I can definitely, and vibe with that, of like, when we have any trauma, one of the main signatures of trauma is this fragmentation, and specifically the fragmentation of a future and like a past, and what happens in that moment of just like that collapse is we lose a sense of purpose and a sense of directionality, and we're like, it's like being cut from the umbilicus without the support of someone holding us in those moments. And we're just like, I mean, I think of those two movies where like there's the astronaut and the cord that binds them to the ship kind of snaps, and like I've certainly felt that way. And I hear that you have, and I think a lot of us have, of just kind of being whiplashed through life and then going, how did I get here?
Yes, and the whiplash is so important. I love that thought, because the whiplash is causing the fragmentation of that energy, energies just being scattered all over. And how do we bring ourselves back to wholeness?
One of the principles that I insist on is that no child should be forced on medication. Like, I don't care at what age, but no child should be made to believe that they're acceptable to their teachers or their parents only if they're medicated. That's the first. So that's just clear.
Yeah.
In terms of myself, I found the diagnosis rather a relief, because all of a sudden I had kind of a map to myself. Now, I've understood since then that the diagnosis doesn't explain anything. It describes something, but it doesn't explain it. So it's a collection of traits, and there's any number of reasons why people can develop those traits. But you're not actually describing a disease entity. You're describing a collection of emotional and behavior patterns. You're describing them, but you're not explaining them, because the explanation is rooted in life experience, as you and I know. Yeah. So that, Scott or Gabor, you know the routine. Scott or Gabor have ADD. How do you know? Because they tune out a lot and they have poor impulse control. Well, why do they tune out? Poor impulse control because they have ADD. How do you know they have ADD? Because they tune out. I mean, it's just a circular tautological loop.
Yeah.
Why? The why has to do with people's lives. So, but nevertheless, I always wanted to write a book, for example, but I could never get, until I knew something with my brain, I just had no map to do it. And so that became my first book. And I took medication while I was taking it, and it helped me concentrate. Yeah. I mean, when I took Ritalin, it made me depressed, but Dexedrine made me concentrate. It also made me speedy and aggressive. And that had impacts in my personal life and my professional life. But I appreciated the focus and the incentive that it gave me, and I couldn't have written that book without it. More recently, that was the book Scattered Minds, my first book. My most recent one, The Myth of Normal, is much more complex, much longer. It took much more research, took much longer to write. I took no medication, and in fact, when I tried to take medication, thinking I'll focus better, all it gave me was side effects. So my brain had changed in the meanwhile, is the whole point, which is one of the interesting facts about the human brain, is that thank God, it can develop throughout the lifetime. But I welcome the diagnosis as kind of a map to myself. And, but I totally understand the sense that many people have when they take medication, that it's not them and that it's not comfortable. I've had the same experience with Prozac, actually. Like, I took fluoxetine in my 40s, and you know what? It actually helped. I calmed down. I was less impulsive. I was not as aggressive. That was fine. Later, when I tried it, I just said, this isn't me. I hated it. So it's interesting that even at different phases of one's life, the same medication can have different impacts. And I think it's very personal. And I think the person's sense of themselves needs to be really respected.
Yeah. I mean, do you contribute it to the fact of the work that you have done since the first time you took these medications to now?
Oh, yeah. Like, for example, the more stressed you are, this is true for anybody, ADHD or not, the more difficulty they might have in concentrating, So and those stresses can be external, or they can be generated internally, or they can be relational. So that the more I work on myself and the more in my primary relationship, things become clear, the less stress there is, the less medication I need, so that it's a dynamic thing. And the more people work on themselves, lots of evidence, not that I'm any example of it, that meditation and body practices like yoga and so on, they help to calm the mind, So, yeah, I think the work I did on myself, not that it's ever perfect or complete, but it made a huge difference in terms of how my mind functions. And it's interesting because I look at people have noted, for example, like Peter, a mutual friend, Peter, he told me a couple of years ago that my presentation style, when we presented together publicly, is totally different than it was when he first met me.
Yeah.
I was far more driven and speedy and I suppose less confident, So yeah, be change. We can change.
And I've seen you change over the years too. Not that many years as Peter has seen you, but like there's a way in which it's also like there's a way you've gotten, I feel like, even more personal. Like it's like I feel more of the heart of you, like in the tendrils of your heart touching everyone. That's what to be in the room with you. It feels even more personal.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing to hear. I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, I was going to say modestly, no, but not bullshit. I mean, I do feel. It's not that I'm comparing myself to who I was, but when I'm in a room of people, I do feel the connection. I feel the connection myself.
And I think this actually brings us to the heart of your work too, because I mean, you've described trauma and not as an event itself, but as a disconnection it causes, and you've brought that theme back in terms of chronic illness and ADHD.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if we can really dive into that element of connection. Then is that curative?
First of all, let's just acknowledge that the concept is not entirely or even primarily original with me. Like Peter has said that. I think Peter has said that the biggest loss is the disconnection. Somebody said it, and certainly the spiritual teacher A.H. Alma says that the biggest calamity is not that you were loved or not loved by your parents, but that you lost the connection to your essence. Which is a good thing, because if the problem was what happened to you and I in childhood, it's over, finished, done with, irreversible. But if the problem is the disconnection from ourselves, well, that connection is potentially available at any time. So that's a good thing. And I often, being a former English teacher, I really pay a lot of attention to language. And the word recovery, like when people recover, this is an obvious one. But what does it mean to recover something? It means to find it again. So what is it that people find? And specifically with addictions, when you talk to people, and I don't prompt them, I just ask them, what did you find? They said, I found myself. So that, yes, that's the healing, just to complete it, not to mention that the word healing itself comes from a word for wholeness.
For those who are listening, and I think many people might have like an inkling or maybe an intellectual understanding or maybe not of this idea of like finding ourselves or coming back home to ourselves.
Yeah.
Where did we go?
We disconnected because we didn't go anywhere. We just hid from ourselves.
Yeah.
And we hid from, when do people hide? It's when there's fear.
Yeah.
So there must have been some powerful fear that caused you or I or anybody to hide from themselves. And why would we do that? Because we found that we were out in the open, we weren't accepted. We were perhaps punished or rejected or mocked or misunderstood. So it becomes safer to hide. Now a child can't pretend very well. So that the child, in order to hide, has to not just hide from the outside world, but from himself. Because it's hard, as a 4-year-old, it's really hard to pretend not to be angry if you're angry. But if you hide from your anger by repressing it, then you can do it. So that this unconscious desertion of oneself becomes a survival mechanism. And then the very idea of being yourself, or the very impulse to be yourself, is a threatening one. Because you learned early in childhood that it undermines your relationship with the people on whose your life depends. So we hide from ourselves. And then we develop these personalities of being nice or charming or being consumed with being attractive. So we get attention, not just for existing, which is our birthright, but for being smart or cute or pretty or whatever. And we develop these personalities, and then we confuse ourselves with our personalities. We think we are a personality. We're not our personality.
Well, especially if it's developed in response or compensation to trying to get something while simultaneously hiding.
Well, which much of it is, so that, if you didn't get the sense, for example, that you're important just for existing, which everybody needs to get. You're important. You matter. Well, if you didn't get that sense, then you'll work to make yourself important, and you'll be probably one of these people who go into the helping professions, because now you're going to be important. And it's not that there aren't good reasons, valid reasons to become a helper. I mean, it's just part of our nature to want to help other human beings. But often there's a hidden drive as well, where we're trying to be important in people's lives, or we're trying to be significant by making ourselves bigger than we are, and then we run for presidency of the United States, or if we didn't get the attention we needed just for existing, we might be consumed by becoming very attractive to attract the attention. If we weren't loved, we might become very charming. If we weren't liked, we might become very nice. But these are compensations, and we mistake them for who we are. We identify with them. And so that coming back to ourselves, and I'm sure you found this, is very often a process of disidentifying from who you thought you were. So that very question, when you say to somebody, who do you think you are? That's a really good question. Problem is, usually it's used as a judgment, as an attack. Who do you think you are? But if you actually ask somebody, well, who do you think you are? Who do you actually believe you are? That's a powerful question. Because we often believe we're somebody that we're not.
And it's interesting in the moments of, great rupture or breakups or other job losses, something that sort of takes us down a notch from being able to sustain that sense of identity, it kind of all falls apart. So one of the things I really appreciated about your work is that you said mindset is not enough. And I want to break that down, because for so many people, they're like, it's just a mindset, like get into it. If you can believe it, it will happen. And I'm like, I don't think
lots of people believe in Santa Claus and it's still not real. So,
wait, what?
Oh, sorry. Did I blow that for you? I apologize. Tooth fairy, how about that?
Trigger warning for our audience. Santa Claus may not be real.
Exactly. Or anything. I mean, look at people start wars over beliefs. I mean, beliefs are very strongly identified with as human beings, but you are not your beliefs. And there's plenty of times you've changed your beliefs over the years. So, the thing about mindset, and listen, I'm a master coach in mindset. I led transformative seminars for 30 years, and that's mostly mindset, right?
Yeah.
It's just not enough, because you can have a mindset shift, but if you don't take actions, you're not going to produce results. So, people get addicted to insights, and they're like, I just saw this, I just saw that. Okay, but what did you do out of seeing that? And if you don't turn your insight into an action that creates new results in your life, then you're basically just jerking yourself around,
Have you ever done, and you can just nod if you don't want to talk about it, but have you ever done a psychedelic
No, I haven't. No.
I just recently started it for myself. And what I found was it was so elucidating of insight, and it was seductive. It's like so seductive. And there was a time that I was like, I just need to go get more insight and more insight. And I love what you're saying here, because it's so applicable, because I was like, wait, pause. I'm getting dependent on the insight.
Yeah.
And while it's really helpful, until I take action, that insight really isn't embodied.
Yeah, exactly. It's conceptual, and most people live a conceptual life. But as Alan Watts would say, the menu is not the meal. And people are settling for the menu or the concept of things rather than the thing itself. And my life is about having people have the real deal, not the concept of something.
Alan Watts. Let's just have a moment for it.
I,
That is my erotic literature right there.
Me too. I love them. Oh my God.
We can get dependent on insights, and it's not going to give us the changes and transformation we're looking for. So how do we bridge it? How do we bridge insight into action in a way that will?
Well, that's where word comes in. So when your word has muscle, then what you create has muscle. See, if you see people go, oh, talk is cheap. Talk isn't cheap, but people cheapen talk by not honoring their word. They honor their thoughts, their feelings, their circumstances, their moods, and they flow that way versus have their word give them their actions. So if I have a promise to be loving and appreciative with my father-in-law, he might do something that would normally irritate me or hook me or whatever, send me into that world of reaction. But I have a promise that pulls me out of that world and has me take action consistent with being loving and appreciative. Now I have a different kind of relationship with my father-in-law or whoever, right? If I have a promise to be honorable in my contracts, I might have an initial thought like, well, I could get away with it, but I'm not going to do that because I have this word in the matter. Now, most people's word is weak. So a lot of what I do when I say being unmessable with, it really is about your word being unmessable with, because when you create a vision like you did, Flo, right? Anything that's not that is a violation of your word at this point, because you just created in word your vision. You don't create your feelings, your thoughts, they just happen to you. I mean, they're automatic. It's your brain mostly, creating whatever it creates. And it doesn't require you. Your word is the only thing that you have 100% dominion over. So when people identify as their feelings or their thoughts, and I'm not saying don't have feelings, I have feelings and I have thoughts, but I just don't get in bed with them like they're who I am. Who I am and who I identify with as a creation is my word. So when I give my word, it's like I'm giving myself. And when you build that muscle of word, you all of a sudden are able to create things like doubling your business or intimacy in your marriage or vitality at work or whatever it is you're creating. You can create things to the point, not just, experiences, but results. Like you could say chair, and a chair will come out of your mouth if you get words strong enough. Those kind of abracadabra moments, which abracadabra is my tattoo, one of my tattoos, and it literally means in ancient Aramaic or Hebrew, with my word I create. It does. It's people go, oh, it's like a magic hat thing. No. It is magic, but it's with my word I create. So you say it and it is. That's power. That's freedom.
When you say it, I'm just like, yes, I'm in. and then my deep empathy comes in. I'm like, ooh, and I know how hard it is, and I know how hard it is to keep our word, especially when we are people pleasers, when we have had to self-abandon preservation for all of these patterns that we've had to learn or survive in order to to survive by not keeping our word, essentially, not maintaining boundaries. So if we weren't given the support to maintain boundaries, how could we maintain our own by keeping our word?
Yeah, it is. It's an underused muscle. It's an atrophied muscle for most people. Most people are better at keeping their word to someone else.
Yeah.
Like if I tell you I'm going to meet you at the gym, it's more likely I'm going to go than if I didn't tell anybody and I woke up in a different mood and I was like, whatever, I'll go tomorrow, So people don't keep their word to themselves, and that's the biggest lacking. That's the biggest missing for people. But some people are even bad at keeping their word to other people, right? And that is a function of which world you're in. So if you're in the world of reaction, it's also a world of reasons and justifications and explanations. And you get in that kind of soup and it's very hard to get out of it. So you need to create a gym to get you to that world of word and vision and creation, which is all the work that I do is so that people have mechanisms and structures to be able to develop that muscle. Just like me going to see my trainer is going to develop my quads or whatever muscles. I don't know what those things
are. Your quads look great, by the way.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yes, exactly. They feel horrible, but whatever. But that's the point. It's like, if I went by my feelings, I'd never do anything. I mean, I never feel like doing anything except listening to Barry Manilow and eating cheese. That's pretty much all I ever feel like doing. So, if your feelings are what you're following, you're screwed. But if you have a word, and you've had this happen, we've all had it happen, where you maybe a promise to go to I'm just using the gym because this is like what I'm doing now, right? So if you have a promise to go to the gym and you start taking the actions, the feelings follow. Yeah. But if people are waiting for the feeling to take the action, they are definitely messable with.
Say that again. That's important.
If people are waiting for the feelings to take the action, then they are, by very definition, messable with, because you have no say over your feelings. Your feelings are a crapshoot. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. And it really has nothing to do with your commitment and has nothing to do with the results. Your abs don't care if you feel like doing sit-ups. If you do the sit-ups, your abs will respond and you'll have the results of doing sit-ups. You don't need to wait to be motivated to go to the gym. Motivation is for suckers. It's just like hope. It's like, what are you waiting to be motivated for? Who cares? Have a promise to yourself or to someone else and then honor your word. And the motivation's irrelevant. You'll get the results. You want results or feelings?
Thank you for joining us on this journey through some of the most memorable moments from our recent episodes. I hope these highlights have sparked new insights and inspired you as much as they've inspired me. If you found value in these conversations, I'd love for you to share them with your fellow gently used humans. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, please leave a review. It helps us reach more people who could benefit from these powerful discussions. Until next time, keep growing, keep healing, and keep being the wonderfully imperfect humans that you are.